the mission of Voices of Hope really weaves in so perfectly with our mission at Speak Up in helping people tell their true stories and helping people connect. And it's just been such an honor to be involved in this process. Voices of Hope is an organization I feel really passionately about, and I feel really lucky and honored, and I know Matt does too, to play even a small part of it. Sharon and Jeff and Lois, Peter, Evelyn, Matt, and I met for only over 3 weeks. When we started, we were really, this was new to all of us. Matt and I had never done anything like this before, and everybody was just so gracious and willing to work, and what they came up with in this short amount of time is terrific, and I'm excited to present it to you today. Our next storyteller is Peter Fishman. Peter is another Connecticut native who was born in Hartford, and he now lives in Farmington. His parents, Herb and Ruth, live in West Hartford, and his mother is a survivor. Peter's the dad of 2 sons, and he works in commercial real estate. And I want to say that Peter was really kind and generous enough to let us use a space in his really beautiful complex in Farmington for our workshops. And Peter also was great at supplying a nosh. He stopped at Trader Joe's, he picked up snap peas, and all sorts of goodies for us. So thank you very much for that, Peter. Peter told me, I'm going to do my best with this, best I can, Peter. His favorite Yiddish phrase is, "Geh kacken auf den Yom." Some of you know that, which the cleaned up version means, go poop in the ocean. Peter gave me another word too, you know what it is. Happy to introduce Peter Fishman. Did I get it? Okay, good. All right, so I want to make sure the height's good for you.
I think
Bring it up
a little bit higher.
Yeah, good.
I've always known I was lucky, fortunate, glass half full sort of person. I didn't always know why. I can't do it without my cheat sheet. I don't win the lottery. I have to work for what I want, but I know how fortunate I am and how lucky I am to be alive and live here with the freedom that I have. I never experienced hunger. I grew up in a house where there was plenty of food, and there's always plenty of food in my own home. Families of Holocaust survivors seldom have large extended families, but I was fortunate enough to grow up with 2 sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins, something a lot of my friends took for granted. I know that if not for the fortunate events that took place in my family's lives, that I may have not been here to witness the sunrise with the awe that I see in it. As Hitler rose to power, my grandfather was smart enough to move his family from Germany to Holland, and he thought it would be far enough away. But as the Nazis invaded Holland, it became clear it was not. My mother's a Holocaust survivor, and that makes me a 2nd-generation survivor. But what is not miraculous about her sole survival is that she survived along with her brother, mother, father, and paternal grandparents. I have come to understand that her survival is because of some special circumstances, because of my grandfather's line of work, some of his non-Jewish friends, and perhaps a few other reasons. She survived, or they survived, 2 different concentration camps, Westerbork in Holland and Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia. In 1942, February 1942, my grandfather was fortunate enough to be able to visit a business associate and non-Jewish friend and give him 130,000 guilders. It was an amazing amount of money to have been able to have put together in that point in time. And in today's dollars, it would be $750,000. He told his friend Egbert to use that money for any means necessary to get them out of Holland, to get them falsified papers, to find smugglers to bring them to England. He also told him that that money could be used for any of his friends, relatives, and business associates and help them escape the madness. When my family was supposed to report to the Jewish theater by order of the SS, my grandparents instead decided to go into hiding. Hiding was a very, very difficult thing for them. And in the process of being in hiding, a godsend occurred, and they were able to obtain a falsified Paraguayan passport from the Bern consulate in Switzerland. After they realized that they couldn't stay in hiding, they came out, they turned themselves in, they went to the Jewish theater, and they were uncertain of what the outcome would be at that time. My grandfather was in the metal business, and the Nazis needed the metal to feed the war machine. Because of this, he was given special consideration. The Nazis needed the metal, the Westerbork concentration camp and the Dutch government needed the money, and the Jews needed to survive. My grandfather, along with a handful of other Jewish men, created a metal business within the concentration camp where they bought scrap metal, had the prisoners sort the metal, and then sold the metal. My grandfather and 2 other of his associates were allowed to leave Westerbork, leave the concentration camp, move back to Amsterdam, not alone, but with their families, and live there because you couldn't sell the metal from the camp. They needed to be able to travel and sell the metal. They were able to remove their Jewish stars. As this process continued, they kept as many as 1,500 Jewish prisoners working and from going east to a certain death. As the momentum to rid Holland of all the Jews, the SS wanted to get all the Jews out of Holland. Eventually, they were ordered to report back to the Westerbork concentration camp. The metal work still continued with the difficulties it had now in camp. And on one of my grandfather's business trips, he was lucky enough to stop in a store and buy a doll for my mother's upcoming birthday. It was a simple doll with a porcelain head about the size of my fist. The head of the doll was hollow. On July 17th, my mother's birthday, my grandmother Margaret made her a cake made from potatoes. It tasted awful, but it looked like a birthday cake. They gave my mother the doll, and she was very lucky to have gotten that kind of a birthday present in Westerbork. My mother and grandmother had a tendency to push food. They made us feel guilty that we should always finish our plate. They made us appreciate the food that we had. When I grew up, there were no date codes. Food didn't get wasted until it was used. It had to be eaten. Anything that was left over was fried with butter and onions. Bread and cheese that had mold on it, it was cut off and it was still eaten. I have trouble still today wasting food. I have a difficult time throwing anything away. My children, when they go to my mom's house, they'll check the date codes to make sure that what they're eating is okay to eat. So some of the traits of survivors still come through to the next generations. I grew up with a summer home on a small lake in Connecticut. In one of those bedrooms, there were pictures on the wall, and when I was little, even though my sister doesn't remember this, we used to ask my mother and my grandmother to tell us stories about those pictures. Those stories, they were very creative in telling the stories that incorporated clues of their survival. They would tell us stories of children who didn't have enough food to eat, or didn't have clothes to wear, or didn't have a good place to live. My mother would tell us stories about her time in concentration camp, where she would have to go and get watery soup and carry it across the camp without spilling any of it so that they would have food for dinner. Before my mother and family left from Westerbork to go to Theresienstadt, my grandfather revealed a secret to my mother. He told her that in the head of the doll that there was money, and that she was to guard the doll and not let anybody have it, not let it out of her sight. He told her that she should never do anything to leave the doll anywhere, that if anyone tried to take it away, that she should carry on, and that it was very important for her to hang on to the doll. It was a very important responsibility for a 9-year-old child. When I was 11 years old, I was fortunate enough to get sent to Maine for summer camp. And it was perhaps one of the worst experiences in my life. I was a chubby kid. I didn't like to play sports. I didn't swim. I sunburnt easily. I was made to play soccer without a shirt. I was forced to swim. And about halfway through, I tried to run away. And very fortunately for me, my parents came and got me and brought me home. In 1994, I went on a trip to Yad Vashem and Israel with UJA. It was an amazing trip. But for the first time in my life, I saw facts and figures of things that I had never truly understood before. I saw the cattle cars that my mother and her family were in to be moved to Theresienstadt. I saw the bunks that they slept in, and I fully understood for the first time that there was no way that it was like any kind of summer camp, that my mother would make that comparison. The facts were just blew my mind. I never, as an adult, understood really what the ordeal must have been like. There were 144,000 Jews that went through Theresienstadt. 33,000 died there. 88,000 went on to Auschwitz. By war's end, 19,000 had remained. 15,000 children went through Theresienstadt, and by war's end, only about 2,000 remained. My mother and her brother were 2 of those children, and it's just amazing that they were able to survive. I left Yad Vashem with facts and information that I just really hadn't understood before, and it made me understand what my legacy was and what my responsibility is to let other people know that what had happened. Not only did I grow up pretty much protected from the facts of what happened to my family, they just didn't talk about it in a way where it seemed to be a difficult situation, but I grew up in a very pleasant childhood without any bad things happening or stories being told. When I was bar mitzvahed, my grandfather made a speech where he told me our family will always be Jewish and we'll be proud of it, and that the things that happened, the bad things that happened during the Hitler years, should never happen again, and that the most important thing in life is to be a decent human being. I was lucky enough to be brought up without the hate, that the knowledge that my grandparents and mother could have instilled in me, and I was very fortunate to be living in free without that around my neck. But after the trip to Yad Vashem was the first time that I realized just how truly lucky I really was. Thank you.